Don't people need to process their feelings in order to heal from trauma? So the simple answer is no. People do not need to process their feelings in order to heal from trauma. That's very foreign to our way of thinking, but I want to see if I can kind of play with you a little bit on this one. So the way we have kind of created the mental health culture in, at least in the United States and most of the westernized countries, is this. We have really gone to what I call neocortex centric. In other words, very, very academic, very, if you want to think of it top down, very cognitive approaches, and or we come at it from the other way, which is very amygdala centric, which is all about intense emotion. The problem with either of those is that the person that is experiencing a physiological arousal, where they are perceiving threat and stress in their body, and their body's reacting to it, one of the side effects to that is if they've had a history of that, they've pretty much spent most of their life being locked in to that amygdala system. And they have difficulty moving out of that system and into the neocortex or the cognitive processes. And for people that have a history of trauma, where you really want to be is in neither extreme. You really want to look at a more holistic approach or a salutogenic approach that is looking at how do we create wellness, which is if we can get people to be calm and regulated and be self-reflective because their body is being managed and their arousal isn't so high, then they can move into the cognitive pieces and be very successful at it. The other piece that they can do if they've achieved that is they can talk about what their emotional experiences have been. But I want to make it really clear there's a very big difference. When we start talking about emotions from the point of view of trauma therapy, we want to be able to recall the emotion in our body, in our thought process, and in our experience, but we don't want to re-engage the visceral emotional feeling. So in that situation, a lot of times you're talking about an intense feeling as a process rather than as an experience. And a lot of therapists that aren't very skilled, what they end up doing is triggering a reigniting of that, of the emotional timbre, the visceral response of the body. And that's not very helpful to people that are trying to work through this. So do you need to do that? Because that's really left over, again, from the psychodynamic area of mental health, which said you had to have a cathartic experience. Excuse me. You had to have this really intense emotional experience to heal. And that's just not the case. You don't need a really intense emotional experience. In fact, if you have a trauma history and you as the therapist provoke an intense emotional experience from your client, you are hurting them, not helping them. So while you might love all of that drama and you might be very attracted to emotions because you might be a high-level emoter yourself, you do not want to be provoking those excuse me, to your trauma clients. I hope that makes sense. So again, the simple answer, your clients do not need to process their intense emotions or their deep feelings in order to heal from trauma. And in fact, we find people heal a whole lot better if they can get to the place where they can have discussions, they can have they can remember, they can process through without having you provoke that visceral feeling attached to that emotion. There's a difference between remembering something and re-experiencing something. We always want them to remember something, but we don't need that visceral experience to go with it. Hopefully that's helpful.